everyone, welcome to another Book Review Wednesday. I am so sorry that this video has to be uploaded late. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, I would be not able to upload Wednesday's video until today. So without further ado, let me address the book that I wanted to address for this Book Review Wednesday. And that is Philippa Gregory's The Red Queen. Now, as you can probably tell by the lack of enthusiasm on my face, this book, I think, was one of the books that kind of bothered me in a lot of ways, particularly with the main character, and I'll sort of get into that as I explain what really the plot is centered on. But overall, I think there was just a lot within this book that was very one-sided, and good, I guess you could say, overview of the historical things that I guess were going on during this time, since this is a historical fiction book. But without further ado, basically this book takes place around the 1400s, before the famous Henry Tudor's reign, that occurred within 15, and later, I believe it was probably, I'm guessing it's the early 1500s. Correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm really not good with the dates. But it's supposed to be when England is still sort of divided, because you have these multiple nobles with huge amounts of resources, and they want to sort of claim the ultimate prize as king and whatnot. And this book tries to take it through the perspective of one of those sides, and that is the House of Lancaster, because basically in this time period you have the House of Lancaster, which includes the Tudors, and then you have York as the other side, so to speak. And these two sides sort of have been divided as to far as who is really the true king under God. And back during around this time, this is when really religion was really emphasized. And a lot of people liked to claim that God was on their side, because if God was on your side, then it's pretty much the ball is and power is in your court, so to speak, and you have ultimate reign. But each side would like to claim, that God is sort of on their side. And this is where I think the book really fails to really engage me in this kind of a concept, because the main character, and the one that we basically see through, because basically the entire book is written pretty much through her perspective, the main character, who is part of the House of Lancaster, is, I think, a complete bitch. I did not like this character at all. She is so full of herself, and first off, let me say I have nothing against people who have their religious beliefs, but I think she sort of used God as kind of a weapon, and she had very romantic ideas about Joan of Arc. You'll see that within the book. She sees herself as some great warrior, even though she never fights throughout this entire book. And she thinks that she's some great, person, and she uses God as sort of a justification, and thinks that she's so much better than everybody else because of that. And she says that a lot throughout this book. So if you don't like people putting up an ego for themselves throughout a story, you're definitely not going to like this book. And this is part of the reason, too, why this book did not engage me in particular, because I did not like her approach and how she liked to paint herself as, the perfect, person, and that her house was sort of superior and, all that. and sort of claiming the God's on her side and, all that crap. So I really did not like that approach. I also didn't like the approach of, using violence. I mean, at one point, she literally conspires to kill the other side's kids, and I just think that's just so messed up on so many levels. And I'm thinking, why in the world would a loving God want you to do that? So yeah, I think overall she is a power hungry witch. And I did not care for her character at all. I really didn't have a whole lot of sympathy for her because she was all about herself 100% of the time. And she would whine. Man, she would whine in this book. She would complain constantly if something didn't go her way. Constantly. And then finally when she does get her way, it's like, oh yay, I'm so superior and blah blah blah. It doesn't seem like she learned anything throughout this book. I mean, there's no development with her really whatsoever. She just pretty much stays the same egotistical, narcissistic woman throughout this entire thing, and I did not appreciate that. So that was a huge gripe that I had with this book. And it's pretty much I did another book a while back by Philippa Gregory, The Constant Princess, and she had this sort of similar personality as to her, very faithful and very egotistical, and using God as a weapon, so to speak. But it's not up to the level of this woman. Margaret, throughout this entire story, is just out for herself. All she wants is power, and I think it's just the means that she goes to achieve power is disgusting, and I personally don't find her character in any way uplifting or inspiring to anybody. So yeah, I really don't care for this kind of a character. I think it's just, and then she just makes all these assumptions about the other house, even though she really doesn't know anything, even though she claims she does, and it's just so ridiculous. Like I was just kind of screaming at this book to end, all just because of this character. She just bothered me so much. And she didn't learn anything throughout this story. She didn't develop. She didn't gain a new perspective. All she did was sit and whine and complain and, you know, and pray to God that she'll get what she wants. Um, all about her 24/7. All about her son, really, but in a way she's doing it for her own ego. She's not doing it because, she really loves her son. She barely has a connection with the son, and heck, the son isn't even really the primary focus, even though he's supposed to somehow be king, which you will see throughout the story. He tries to ultimately raise an army to claim himself as King of England. And so, yeah, that drove me up the walls. And I didn't like how she was using violence, and she was using this kind of, Joan of Arc rhetoric to kind of push herself as this kind of, celibate, perfect angel woman, which she clearly wasn't throughout the story. So I think there that already there was really something that just truly did not make me enjoy this book and did not get me invested. So I think this was definitely a big step back from Philippa Gregory, as far as a story is concerned, because I didn't feel like I learned anything, and I didn't feel like the characters really learned much either, especially the main character, and there's really no development with her. Also, what I think, again, it was a complete step back from, and this also sort of ties into her other books. You'll see how the Rivers family is mentioned, and they're sort of the enemy within this book. And I really liked how she handled the Lady of the Rivers book. I thought that was at least something that was trying to get a story that wasn't all based around having some narcissistic, overly egotistical woman just bitching and moaning throughout an entire story. I actually thought that was a decent story. But here we're pretty much back to the same crap that we've seen in the other Boleyn girl, where it's just whining and complaining, all wanting power, all wanting, you know, some kind of a using their manipulative ways to, you know, get what they ultimately want. And to me, that's just not admirable. That's not heroic. That's not what I would consider of worth to a character, and even a historical character. So yeah, I really did not appreciate this story a whole lot. The only thing that I would say is engaging is the plot, because again, we kind of go through, you know, how Margaret is sort of, you know, raised up to be this one thing, but no, she wants to be another thing. Oh, we haven't seen that a bajillion times from a female character. Um, you know, and again, it's all through her ego. She's just so full of herself throughout this thing. It just annoys me to no end. And and even then, even though the plot's engaging and you want to know really what happens, and sort of the twists and turns that sort of take up this historical period, the book really, I think, is a detriment when you're having it through this kind of a character's perspective, because you can gain so much more insight if this wasn't told through one side, if this wasn't told through one really narrow-minded lens. You could get so much more value out of the plot. But unfortunately, it's told through her perspective, so we have no choice but to sit and hear her whine throughout this entire thing. The only thing that I will say that is also somewhat redeemable through this book is the side characters. Now, the side characters, regardless of whether side they're on, they're actually fairly likable. For example, Margaret's brother-in-law Jasper is fairly likable. The Henry who's supposed to be king is actually fairly likable, but they don't really do much with these characters. I mean, they're just there to ultimately serve what her real purpose she feels is, which is her own selfish ego, to have her son as king, just so that she can have some title and some wealth and all that. So yeah, I really thought that they were a waste. Like, they really weren't developed all too much. They came and went throughout the story, and they didn't leave as much of an impact on me. And that, I think, really bothered me throughout reading this story, when I really felt it would have been more interesting, these characters, than her personally. And yeah, but they don't really spend a whole lot of time with them. She actually has she goes through multiple husbands, because they eventually pass away. There's one husband that's actually fairly nice, and even when he's fairly nice, and at some points he has his differences with her, she still gets pissed off and angry, and thinks that he needs to do what she thinks is right all the time. And she never gains a new perspective. She never embraces anything that anybody else really says. And she's just so set in her ways. Like, she is brainwashed, I think, somehow. I don't know if it's the religious brainwashing, the brainwashing of how she was raised up in, but it just seems like she is so far gone, you know, into her own little egotistical, God-fearing world, that she can't, you know, reason. So yeah, I honestly felt too that the husband was at least likable, even though he, again, takes up only a certain amount of the plot, and then we don't see him again. So yeah, it's just one of those stories where the woman is just way too full of herself for me to enjoy. And again, especially when you're telling it through one-sided perspectives, this is what you're going to get. And I really was so sick. I was glad when the story was over. I didn't even care about who won, you know. And I mean, again, at the end of the day, it didn't engage me, and I didn't think I learned really anything at the end of the day. And, you know, and I just find a lot of this story just to be so, it just has that kind of woman ego that I don't like. The very crazy over self-absorbed, I'm perfect and I'm better than everybody, and that mentality I just think is just so uninspiring and so gives women a bad name, that I can endorse these kinds of books. I can endorse this story. I mean, it's just a horrible choice of a female character. Like, I just can't embrace it. So yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about it. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who do find some kind of likability towards her. Some people like those really power hungry, crazy women, and I say go for it. Go read as many crazy, power hungry women stories there are out there. But to be honest, I don't think it's inspiring. I don't think it's uplifting. I don't think it's real strength. It's not empowering. It's just all for ego. Not based on merit or on goodness. It's all just out of her, really deep religious convictions, and then her selfish ego on to her thinking, yeah, I have some credibility here just because I was born of royal blood and blah blah blah. So yeah, I just can't stand those kinds of books, and I can't stand those kinds of females characters. So if you don't like that kind of thing, definitely stay away from this book. However, if you do, then you will enjoy this book to no end. Um, but as far as getting anything out of it, I really didn't get a whole lot out of it, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say when it comes to this story. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Her character is not as bad as somebody like Anne Boleyn from another work that Philippa Gregory did called The Other Boleyn Girl. But she's up there in sort of a different way. She's one of those characters who is she's just very self-absorbed, and instead of um, just power, she puts God in front of everything and thinks somehow that makes her righteous. And I think that's just stupid. So yeah, so there is a distinct sort of difference there. But I would say it is similar to the female character that's called the Constant Prince. Similar to the main female character within The Constant Princess, which is another book that Philippa Gregory did that I did review. The only one that I actually did like from Philippa Gregory's was The Lady of the Rivers, which I did review a while back. So if you're interested in checking that out, you are more than welcome to do so. But yeah, I don't want to touch it anymore. Uh, but until next time, everybody.